So let's get started. Thanks for joining. This is a fairly small setting, so we can keep this very interactive. I have some slides, obviously, but that's a tool to have the discussion. So I'm Jim Karkanias. I lead program management for the Information Services Group at Microsoft. We're building the data platform, for those of you who may have seen in the keynote. And we have this notion of an information network that accelerates all of the things we might do in big data across all the various dimensions of big data. I believe personally that making machine learning a first-class function in that network is going to be vital. We can't train everyone to have a PhD in machine learning, so we're going to do the next best thing and create technology that allows you to achieve the same thing or something similar without having a PhD. So hence the name of Democratizing machine learning. Just how many folks here have a machine learning background or want to have a machine learning background? That's impressive. Wow, okay. I bet it's about half the group. And have you heard about PASAL, Project PASAL, or you have? Okay, so only about 10% of the audience has heard about it. Or for the folks that have heard about it, how many of you work at Microsoft? Oh, okay, so, darn it. So half of the people who heard about it work at Microsoft. So this will be an introduction to all of that, and it's coming soon. I can't discuss roadmap details on dates, but I can discuss features, and there's certainly ways to get involved in the product. So let me start by defining the space. Why should you care? I presume you care. You're here already, but predicting the future from data is an important aspect of the analytics frame. I sort of humorously pointed out that large amounts of data can predict email behavior patterns, even though you might not suspect that from the beginning of the journey of trying to predict something. Are folks familiar with the translation projects, machine learning translation projects? And so just to recap that, there are many sort of difficult ways to conduct translation amongst various modes of communication, or you can do it statistically, entirely statistically, and do things in 24 hours that would normally take months and months of work. So again, another indicator of the vast power of data. And you can see for yourself the kinds of things you might want to do by predicting the future from historical data. Figuring out fraud, I'm getting all kinds of fraud alerts using my credit card in Sweden. I've never been to Sweden before, and all of the associate agencies are trying to understand why is there a spend there. But more interesting than that spike is their adjustment to recognizing it's a false signal. And they did that almost immediately without my intervention, which I'm not sure if I should be relieved about or excited about what that means in terms of the underlying infrastructure that's there. I don't think I need to belabor this piece of it. That analytics is a big data capability, I'm asserting. And again, given the size of the audience here that we're benefiting from, we can debate as well and discuss things. So does anyone have a point of view about analytics that is contrary to this? Just curious, some folks might think about analytics as something at an angle to big data, not really a consequence in it. So no, seems like. Okay, so let's walk through the steps of building a predictive model. First, you have to define the business problem of what it is you're looking at, fraud detection. You need to get the data prepared. You need to develop a model through certain iterations, deploy the model, monitor the model's performance. Oh yeah, I was trying to figure out, is it that? It was distracting me. It was everyone looking at the donut like me. So anyone who's done a machine learning or any kind of model understands these steps are sort of natural steps. And Judy, when she was walking us through the Power BI stack, essentially was doing those things. And the tools that we're putting in place there are meant to streamline that activity. So what would it look like if instead of producing a table or some rectangular data structure in an Excel spreadsheet, we were producing a machine learning model? And that's the essence of what's behind the PASAL project. So let's talk about that. Data scientist. Anybody thinking about a career in data science or already having a career in data science from that perspective? Yes, smiling faces. It's a great place to be. You're in a market that does not yet have commodity dynamics, and even as it becomes commoditized, it will. Heads up, you might be seeing that. As we issue these tools, there will still be a value for the experts in the environment, and I liken it to the VB era. So I'm old enough to remember when programming was done in assembly and other very difficult to use languages, and as the C++ crowd came and the tools to use that, that created a new inflection point and opened the market to developers, but nothing was like the wave that VB caused, where folks who had developer inclinations but didn't have the time or energy to be able to learn assembly or C were able to nevertheless deliver developer-style solutions through visual languages. So imagine if there was a world like that for machine learning, and that's essentially what we're trying to bring to bear. But still, given the VB era that we're in now, let's call it, there is still a need for the expert programmers, and I would argue that will still be the case for the expert data scientists, even in this world where the tools make it easier to work. It is too complex. I'm sure, if anybody's wrestled with a model trying to get it to converge, there's many hair pulling. I had a full head of hair when I started in the machine learning. I like to joke. I was in machine learning when it was called neural networks, and I would love to have had the tools that are even available now. And this tool is being built by people that want to make this thing a reality. So it has to get simpler. Lots of schools are working in this space, and yeah.
Just an interesting view, because I work for Microsoft, and even since we launched SQL Server 2008, we put this neural network, we put this data mining tools in.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of big conferences a couple of years ago. We were talking about this, and it's including all the SQL servers that we ship.
Yes.
And I'm just interested to hear your view.
But
because
so how
the question is really like this. It is really democratized. It's out there.
Well,
very few people use it.
It's friction, I would argue, and I'd be interested in the discussion about that. Our analysis indicates it's friction. It's there. It's not. You have to really understand how to apply it to use it, and that's the. Did you want to expand?
Yeah. One of the things we saw is that people, just because they have data mining tools in SQL Server, they think they can just use any algorithm that's available,
right,
apply to any problem,
right,
and they come to conclusions,
right.
But they don't start thinking about whether those conclusions make sense or not,
or applicable,
because
right.
they really apply the wrong algorithm. Or sometimes they need to apply a collection of them,
right,
a combination of them to write the right place.
Right.
But unless you have a background in statistics and really PhD, as you said me before,
yes,
you don't really know whether you're doing the right thing or not.
Right.
So there's still a friction there, even if the tool's there.
Exactly.
You get a result,
right,
but you don't necessarily get the right result.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can. It is, and so imagine if the tool, so to use the developer analogy, developers know when their programs are not working. The compiler will complain and say these many things were not valid. Imagine if a machine learning model generation tool would tell you this is not an applicable way to apply this data set. That would change, just that alone would change the dynamic. Achieving that is no small task because compilers are complicated. It took a while before compilers were advanced enough to drive through, syntax completion in the tool, and we're essentially trying to do that for machine learning. For folks who know about Passau, how many folks have actually used it or played around with it? Okay, a small handful. What do you think? Let me just cut to the chase, and we can go through the context, but is it meeting the bar, or the things you're applying it to? Has it, if you're willing to discuss that?
Well, it's a friction issue. It's an engine.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's cool when we've got some GUI to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you can call it, or is going to be called data labs, and it kind of is that. It's a little lab that you can do things in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's isolated.
Yep.
And if it won't be truly valuable until it's baked back into like Power BI and the user interface, so that when you
Great.
have a problem, a data set, you can push a button and it works like the Excel add-ins.
Right.
And it takes a little bit of the misstepping that, you know, and says, these are 3 lift graphs of 3 different algorithms. Which one do you want to use?
That's excellent. Yeah, that's great
Bake it
feedback.
in. The engine is critical. You can't do any of that without the engine.
Yeah,
And then the whole extra icing with R and all that, that's awesome.
Right.
That's going to bring in a certain crowd and be more inclusive.
Mhm.
And I think that's critical.
Right.
But then you probably have to bring along some of the folks that are just steeped in the Microsoft world.
Yep.
To kind of connect those dots and say, hey, there's another world out
To
there.
expand those boundaries. That's well said, and I'm not just saying that because that's what we're doing, but it's great feedback. You know, we're trying to figure out a channel for Passau, and the Excel channel is the Office Information Worker channel is an interesting one. We're thinking about, frankly, Visual Studio as a channel, so could you do it within the dev environment? It may not be an either or kind of thing. You can imagine sort of an express version of this thing showing up in Excel and a professional version showing up in, I'm making up names, don't take that as prescriptive, showing up in Studio. We thought about a standalone product all by itself, but for the integration reasons you just outlined, it seemed pretty natural to want to connect. So in Judy's example, if she had created a model that converged some stock data or was trained against stock data and did predictive and analytics on it and then published that into the ecosystem, it would be very natural to do that in the tool she was already in, Excel. And equally, maybe someone else would have done that and she could have just consumed it in that tool. So I think that all resonates with us pretty strongly. Anybody else have an opinion in that space for folks that are hearing it for the first time or that maybe have worked with the tool already?
What I think as you already mentioned, that there is a kind of gap in a kind of knowledge and background that you need, and I don't know if it's a tool that is missing currently that closes the gap. So for the pure data scientists, I think they are very happy to program and they can all do this.
Right.
So they are very fine. They have a problem with scalability, but in order to democratize things, I think we have to get a little bit closer to the point where you don't need to understand every algorithm. So you just need to know which one to apply to a certain problem, and you're just going to use it. And that's where it could very good that it could help people to just use it, so that you have a kind of more high-level data science. I don't know how to name the people, but they are the information workers that just consume it, and then there are people that have to prepare the data.
Yes.
We have to make it a little bit easier for them to do this, but not to understand the whole stack and to first go to university and have a statistic class for some years, you know?
Yes.
So I think if this comes a little bit more easier, I don't know, integrated with a marketplace where you just consume models or things, I don't know, so there are other platforms like Pick and Arrow or other already on the market where we can also share the analytics or the models.
Yes, yeah, good points.
I have a completely different point of view, actually. I think you need to push it to the developers. Because I was developing in MATLAB and I was doing machine learning, and for me it was more, can Microsoft do data mining? Can they really do it? Like, I was not trusting it. And if you sell it to me, and if you sell it to somebody that already has the background to do it, then I'm going to forward it to the customer. And I'm going to say, you should use that, it's a really good tool.
Right.
Because now I don't know how to do that, because I'm not working with it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, we can get you access to it and you can work with it and see what you think. Yeah, we'll
but
solve
I mean,
that.
It's good also to try to get close to the people that are already doing it.
Yes.
Through another tool possibly, and prove that you can do it with Microsoft.
Yes, yeah. So part of we're looking to accelerate the market which is already working in a particular direction. Instead of replace things, accelerate them. So encapsulating R, if you've already invested in R or in MATLAB or in other things, the Kaggle groups that are building in that direction have all their tool sets, if those can be connected into this. You can imagine sort of the GitHub model as a marketplace for code, becoming a marketplace for models that you can also find. The Power BI tool chain is aimed at being able to find whatever object you're looking for wherever it might be. So we kind of, hopefully you're taking for granted, and that's what we want to see happen, that, hey, we just pulled a table out of a Wikipedia page, out of my Hadoop store, out of my file store, and out of a spreadsheet, and put them all together in a few minutes. That's magical. There's a lot of technology to make that happen. We have an engine underneath it that makes sense of that. We want to just keep extending that. So I think we're on the right trajectory. We also don't think we're done. I think the product as it's currently shaped needs work, as is implied in the conversation so far. And we'd love for you to sort of dig into it and let us know what you think. So let's figure out how to get folks connected into the project. The point here is even if every professional institution cranked out data scientists, that's all they did, there wouldn't be enough to meet the demand of what we're faced with in the big data revolution. So this is all sort of recapping the things I talked about at the keynote and just now, and that you can use an end-to-end solution that allows for collaboration, tracking of the models, archiving those models, reusing them, and operationalizing them. So that's another point, is that you can create your machine learning model and have it run locally on your CPU and your desktop or whatever you might have access to, but imagine publishing it up to the cloud and moving it into Azure, using your compute services there, whatever your enterprise might own, throttled correctly, managed through IT policies, and even the model itself might have let's say temporal characteristics. You might only run all the risk management stuff overnight or something like that, or you might run that in real time and pay a different cost. And you can have the infrastructure figure that out for you, as opposed to you having to set up a particular solution for that. So here's I'll do some screenshots here of the tool for folks that haven't seen it. So here's, I think there's a better one here. So you have this sort of Azure-like experience where you're picking modules, dragging them into a workflow essentially, and wiring them together. And there's a better view here where you can, so of the types of modules that we use, they're the usual libraries that you'd want to have in such a tool. So this typical flow of accessing the data, understanding so finding the data set itself, curating it in some way, using Power BI style tools, figuring out what features or targets are critical path for the problem in question, sort of classic machine learning training, and then doing training and testing and controlling your data set, and scoring the model and doing that iteratively. What we want to do is take that entire process and make it a natural outcome of the tool set. Much like today, everyone takes for granted, you hit F5 on your code, run it, see what happens, run it again, tweak the code, run it again, and so on. And that's a very almost discardable process that's driven the just-in-time nature of coding. It didn't used to be that way. You had to do lots of cumbersome things to move your solution forward, however you define the solution. In other words, as dramatic, I'll be a little over dramatic, we're sort of in the assembly language phase of machine learning, as opposed to the modern visual language age that developers are in now. And we're trying to make that happen in the appropriate way, and all the dimensions that we've talked about here are the pieces of that. And that iteration, rapid experimentation, we would argue makes for better models. In fact, the reverse is also true. If it's very painful to get the data organized just so, train it, hope it converges on a minima that isn't, too much of a problem, or a maxima, depending on what you're doing. We have observed that the barrier is high enough that folks sort of accept standard models. And we want to make better, I had a friend who used to joke when VB1 came along, his argument was VB allowed people to write bad code faster. And that was a bad thing from his point of view. From my point of view is yes, exactly. And that was a good thing because you could iterate faster and improve it. And that's the whole idea here. This is kind of an obvious thing. I implied a model repository behind all of this that's discoverable and has the network effect of people contributing. I don't know what folks think of Kaggle, but to me that's sort of an existence proof that this kind of thing can benefit from a social network effect of people contributing. That I see nodding heads there. Is there a general feeling about Kaggle overall and as a utility in the market? Is it something you leverage your customers? Yes.
A little bit depends on the customer. So we have worked with customers that have the skill set within the company because they think it's an IPR for them, and so they really push this topic and they invest in people that can do things and, in order to be or to have a kind of advantage on the market.
Right.
And the other customers, they just say they want to use it, but for them it's not. So they just want to have a service, right? So they don't have the skill set. So typically these topics are also brought to BI departments,
right?
And they are totally, it's totally too much to them, and they have so much trouble with the normal BI stuff, and they cannot.
Not even
do things like this. So then they are looking for pure solutions, like okay, here's my data. Is there somebody who can do something for me? And what is the platform? Maybe I can use the Microsoft platform for this. But it's totally kind of outsourced or used as a service just to them in order to get just the results.
And I think that spreads across industry. That isn't industry specific, the phenomenon you're describing. And what we're wondering is, what would happen if you could do Kaggle for yourself, right? So if you could harness the domain expertise in your company that could help move this along and train things and drive towards some endpoint that is internal to your company, then you sort of can have your cake and eat it too. You can protect your IP, you can have a network effect. Most companies are large enough to have a network effect. What they're missing is a tool set that actually could work that way. And I admit we're not there yet in the usability of the tool, but that's our target. That's what we're aiming for. Okay, so this is just proving that you can have a list of experiments, and those are published up to the Azure backend. Here's an example of, being able to work. If folks have worked in LabVIEW or other visual tools that pull models together and allow you to, clicking into each of these models lets you set the parameters for each of them and other computation characteristics, or you can take one and clone it and work from that and iteratively build that library. Yet we have the usual things you would expect in a machine learning tool set, ROC calculators, other things like that let you, figure out how close your system is to what you want it to be. No machine learning topic is complete without a conversation about social analytics. Everybody tries to use that big data stream to understand what's happening in the market. Twitter generates an enormous amount of data that's highly sensitive to consumer sentiment. If only you could access that data and throw it into a tool set that could manipulate it, and you could probably predict where I'm going, which is the Power BI information network framework that we're building takes all the friction out of that system. The machine learning side takes all the friction out of that system. If the two could connect, you could start delivering value in these areas almost overnight. And that's the kind of thing we're trying to create. And as a result, it's an amplifier. You don't want to overmake this point, but the whole idea is to amplify your productivity. And then once you have your model created, operationalize that. So in the keynote, I talked about discovering the data sets that are interesting to you, refining them, collaborating with others in whatever context makes sense, operationalizing those rather to run on a computational fabric, and then stewardship of some kind, whether that's access control to the model or continued curation and refinement of the model. And that, in the keynote, is more general focus on data of any kind. In this context, I would assert we can apply that to the machine learning space, and the context is around building a model or a set of models and their interactions. This is what we've talked about already. So providing scale out through the infrastructure, ease of deployment, collaboration across a network, and building a marketplace for these modules, sort of the GitHub kind of thing. So we're kind of doing these slides out of order given the discussion, but it's good that we're sort of resonating across these points.
I have a question, actually, a few slides back there. Identity matching was one of the topics on one of the slides there.
Yep.
I'm currently working on a project relating to school,
Mm-hmm.
school data,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a lot of personal information in this database. And we want to provide as much detailed information as we can,
Mm-hmm.
and yet
Without
we-
breaking blind.
we have to absolutely avoid identity matching.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we
Yep.
do not,
I get it.
if some big data system ever is able to use identity matching on our data,
Yeah.
we, go
You're
to jail.
you're done. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's is it possible? I mean, are there some tools to
Yeah.
provide insight and yet also
Yes.
have protections built in?
Yes, with a caveat. So it's a bit paradoxical to try and do analysis on individual units of data without identifying the data. And arguably, once genomic scanning becomes more prevalent and cheaper, it's already accelerating down the cost. It's going to be impossible to stay anonymous because that's a very unique identifier. But if the attributes of what you're trying to analyze can function at the cohort level, right? Then it's very easy. If you can use aggregate functions in some way, then obviously you can have anonymity. And I don't mean to suggest a trivial solution. I want to use that as a context for the more complex solution. We have algorithms we call privacy-preserving algorithms that basically fuzz the data to a particular degree to make it difficult to identify the person. A motivated person can still identify anyone, even if you have a very strong security. It can be defeated no matter what you do. But you can make it so prohibitive computationally to do that in effect you've preserved the privacy. So for example, if you have a health data set that has age as a dimension, and there's only one 80-year-old woman in this block, then the geo services will fuzz her address to the distance necessary to put her in a cohort of 80-year-old women so that you couldn't identify which one. Now you lose resolution. There's nothing free. The physics here of the information means you have to lose resolution somewhere, but it might be acceptable to the model sensitivity for that to be the case. So it may not be important that it's within 20 city blocks. You really only need to know the zip code, for example. And it turns out there are many dimensions like that you can apply to these spaces, and even then query the system in ways that manage that. But if we allow people to query the system infinitely, they will eventually triangulate, well, who was that person by using other dimensions. So we limit how many queries you can have. And there are many techniques to use. GPS coordinate systems, for example, typically, I don't know what it is now, but they used to be 5-meter resolution, and because the military needed higher resolution and they didn't want everyone to have it. But quite a few researchers defeated that by putting multiple GPS units in a row. You put 5 of them in a row, a meter apart, then you have 1 meter resolution. You can do the equivalent thing in information and triangulate on any piece of data, unless you make it impossible. So there's maybe a long answer to to your question, but we think it's possible to use such techniques and build libraries around these things that allow people to leverage a system and still preserve privacy for a cohort.
It's very important, well, and again, the education, but also obviously in the medical field, as you were
Mhm.
saying,
Mhm.
to be able to get the information out that you need,
Yeah.
or the benefit that you want from the system,
Right.
and yet still comply with
All the regs.
laws and ethics.
Right.
And,
Yep. And then there's another layer to continue, which is, the model, the resolution might be different based on the person using it, right? So some people may be allowed to have full resolution information, and you can detect that. If the whole system is operating in, let's say, an AD framework, and you can ensure permissions and identify who it is that's accessing this process, you can change the resolution of detail that you give and do that on the fly. And that's also part of the things we're thinking about. Again, in the Power BI example, so we, famously Microsoft dog foods its products. We're using Power BI and the equivalent IS stack that's coming out of my group internally. So 80,000 people are using that to find the data inside of Microsoft. Unsurprisingly, there is data that some people can see and some people can't see, and even the existence of that data can't be known, and the system handles that using the typical role permission kind of techniques you'd expect. Okay, so because we've kept this a very interactive conversation, I'm not sure that we haven't turned all these stones over, but kind of the things I wanted to sort of spark as a discussion after I loaded up this context would be the kinds of things you see here, and utility. I think it's been open discussion so far, but I'd just like to open it to anything general that folks want to talk about. In terms of concretely getting you access to the tool to play with it, you can talk to me or Judy or Mark, and we'll figure out a mechanism to get you or your company engaged on this. Many of the pieces I talked about in the keynote are already in GA, have GA'd recently, or will GA soon. This is GAing after that. I can't tell you exactly that date right this second, but I'll tell you it's next year. So most of the things that we're working on right now are completeness of the library, so we'd love to have feedback on what kinds of things should be in there. Integration across tool set channels, so the Excel form versus the Visual Studio form, and the collaboration framework, like how should that take shape. But we'd love to hear, get more feedback from you. So with that, anything that we haven't touched on yet?
Something I wanted to ask is like when you have to look at the analytics market and you see what other companies are doing, then we have the typical vendors like SAS or IBM with SPSS, and like SAS, I think 2 weeks ago, so they mentioned that they have a close integration with the Hadoop stack, so that's on top of Hadoop.
Yep.
And what I see is like you have the big, you have the analytic vendors, and then we have the more data vendors like Oracle, like IBM, like SAP or Microsoft.
Yes.
And from a pure BI data storage stack, I think we are in good shape. We have HD inside, we have large-scale databases with PDW, but on the analytics side, then we have this a little bit kind of isolated island now, which is called Passau. And what I see now is that the other vendors, they are doing a little bit differently, like Teradata or IBM and all the others like SAP. They're pushing to do analytics in the database. And what I see from customers and people that are doing analytics, so they demand a kind of experimental tool set where they can find their models and where they can find the patterns that they're looking for, and then just apply it on the whole data set. So like just take it, run it, and I don't want to care about data movement stuff, and and question is now, this is now a different way that Microsoft is going. So is there also something planned on pushing analytics to the database?
Yes.
In order to not lose the database in the analytics market? Or?
Yes, yeah. So let me rephrase your question through an answer, which is we intend to plumb analytics as a first-rate function all the way through the system, but we want to make sure that the user experience is also first-rate. So we could take the database up approach, but that's essentially what we've been doing since 2008 or so, and it's too much friction. So we want to reach down now from the user experience side, integrate it with other tools, and then advance the plumbing to match that. And that's all coming. Things like, you need a graph store environment to sort of manage these loose network relationships, and we're adding layers to that. You need HD Insight kinds of things to make MapReduce an easier thing to deal with than the sort of cumbersome FTP-oriented, get your data over here kind of thing, and on and on. And there's N of these things that are coming, and you can sort of infer from what you're seeing in the SQL 14 wave and what's in PDW in terms of trying to make these things turnkey. And we can discuss more roadmap through the TAP process as folks engage there. Anything else? I'm not sure how we're doing on time. Are we over? Oh, okay. Yeah, 10 minutes, 11:15 or 11:30? Okay, so I'm all yours for 15 more minutes. If there's anything else, yes?
So, two things. I don't know if you have it on the roadmap to make the data prep integrated with Power Query, so that there's ability to maybe mock things up in Excel and then move that type of macro, that's a Power Query macro, into the cloud. That would probably be an
useful, yeah,
integration of your products.
I'm not sure. Tell me more what you mean exactly.
Well, Power Query, I can go and basically run a durable macro
Yes.
On data, and
Yep.
a lot of data mining is prepping the data so
Sure.
you can use it.
Yep.
So
Replay that.
Yep. And
Okay.
then you have a similar
Yep.
type of a tool set that's in Passo, or
Yes.
Passo, that is kind of doing the same thing.
Yes.
I think that it would make a lot of sense if
Yes.
I built something in Excel with Power Query that then I could somehow import that
Yep.
logic without having to rebuild it.
Yes, got it. Yeah, that's great feedback, and we are looking to merge those things in the right way. So a question about that would be, so if you were, do you think, so as a data scientist, would you work in Excel first and do those things with Power Query style things to prep your data? Would that?
Well, I think it goes with the theme of democratizing.
Yeah,
So,
well, we think so, but I'm asking, do you think so?
Well,
Seems
I
like
think
you do.
so, but
Yeah.
I'm kind of an Excel bigot, so
That's good.
I'm the wrong guy to ask. So it depends on whether you're trying to bring over people that are already diehard data scientists, or whether you're trying to be additive and make more people data scientists that already have access to these tools.
Yep.
I think it's probably more of the latter.
It is. It is without displacing the former, right? And we think we can do that by providing a professional channel for the former. And we're struggling, frankly, with what that professional channel should be. Or currently, it's an Azure portal style thing. You'll see in Mark's session, what the IT pro will have to do. And we think there is a space for that for machine learning professionals operating that way. And there's a much larger space for machine learning people using Excel as a channel. And so the merging that you're implying is great feedback and things we're looking at right now. Yes?
Question about moving on to visualization. So I've seen some projects where people try to find patterns in data by just visualizing, like visual exploration. And there was one nice example. I think it was a Washington Post or something. So they scanned all the Twitter data, and they wanted to figure out if somebody talks about an article that they wrote on their website about a news article. So how many of them tweeted about the topic? And do they also read this article? So is there a correlation between the people that come to their website and read the article and then talk about? And they found different patterns. But they had people in a kind of research lab. They really program new visualization techniques in order to take large data sets and just try to find find patterns by visualize the data.
Mhm.
And is there something that you plan for?
Yes, so visualization in its entirety as a topic is something we're looking at across all of the products from an experience perspective for exactly the reasons you outlined. So, trying to, we all have very advanced visual processing engines. Our visual cortex can see things that even the largest amount of tables won't give you. Very few people can look through 1,000 rows and see a pattern, but all of us can see it in a graph. So we want to find what is the effective user experience to make that possible. And there are lots of Tufte-style techniques, sparkline things that are aimed in the right direction. It's not only that, but more. We also have sort of, forecasting is a natural visualization trend to think about, but backcasting also. So, what would have had to happen for this current state to be true, and what would I have had to modify for this current state not to be true? And it's interesting to think about being able to interact with your data in that way through a visual metaphor to get better understanding. So Power Q&A, which is a product in this space, is aimed squarely at that market.
You can have more kind of Azure Labs, like the things that we had before, where you just provide something and just get some feedback. So I would appreciate a more rapidly approach where you probably try something, get some feedback, say, oh no, this not work, go next thing, and right, so that, because I think this is a space where the market needs to find itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of space to grow, and what I love to see is a little bit more rapidly things that people can play around, and they say, oh yeah, that's a good thing, and is there something planned for more?
Yeah. I will. It's an active area of debate. I will take that feedback back to headquarters. I will tell you what's happened is some customers play with the fill in the blank tool in the lab set and love it and are angry when it doesn't continue. Some customers hate what they see and they're happy that it doesn't continue, and there's every combination. And so perhaps we've head too far down on the stable side, but if things are in preview, we're fairly certain we are going to ship it. We're still not, it's not a commitment even then, but that's the path we're on now. But I will take that feedback back, and like I say, it's active debate right now. I think there was a question over here.
Yes, question. I think what you do about educating the market, so to speak. Many of my clients, they have already read white papers and books, maybe from IBM.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They educate the market. They write about what to think about in this area, this space, and they've already read that gospel when we meet them.
Yes.
So what are you doing on that in that area?
Beyond the normal evangelism that Microsoft does in this space, so you should expect.
Yeah, it's sort of more like broader white papers, and also in material on what to do in certain industries, and addressing sort of the high end.
For machine learning in particular, yeah.
And also, I would say, more advanced analytics with people with a background in statistics.
Yep. Yeah, so we will follow the path we normally do in evangelism, our EPG and DPE groups that evangelize technologies. Typically, as part of the general availability process is to prepare the way through these mechanisms. So, I'm not aware right now of the state of the documentation for the machine learning space, but that's usually previewed as part of the program itself as you start to work with it. The preview documentation is part of it.
But one of the things I'll add from an ecosystem perspective, that's exactly what we're focused on as well. Because once we start getting to specific industry verticals, we start working with customers and partners in that space. We're holding white papers and use cases and really playing out how the models and the algorithms are pertinent within those industries are really going to help showcase how
Right.
it's pertinent. And the reason, I think purposely Jim has created an ecosystem team within product development is exactly to serve that purpose.
Right.
as well.
So we want to put it in the context of that industry and then test the communication as if we were testing code, right? And see, is the communication helping or not? So your point's right on. Yes?
And when I look at presentations like this, or products, or let's say advanced solutions like this from Microsoft, I always had the same concern. Just
How much? No.
Microsoft typically search for advice or search for feedback, probably from the wrong group of people,
Ah,
right? So experts on the subject are not the right people to ask for these type of things.
oh, I see.
They are a completely different audience. So if you look at the future of this,
That's a good point.
looking at 20 years from now,
Yeah.
the users of this are going to be everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody on the cell phone.
Yeah.
They're going to search for a restaurant, and
Yeah.
a machine based on this is going to advise them where to go.
Right.
Or they're going to search for a film to watch, and someone is going to help them to make that decision for them.
Yeah.
So, but we are not asking them.
No.
We are asking data scientists. We are asking development companies who have a living out of it.
Right.
And sometimes because we think very closely about that, say, well, it is democratized so much, where is our work for us?
Mhm.
Or is there actually the opposite? The more you spread this, the better for us.
Yes.
It's going to be far more work for us.
Yes.
Because with more advanced work, it's more enjoyable.
Yes.
It's like a database administration.
Yes.
Today is a commodity.
Yeah.
But still, there's very interesting work to do for database administrators.
Right.
It just is only for, let's say, a smaller group of experts.
Hmm.
But this small group of experts are doing much more interesting work than before.
Right.
But just because database administration became a commodity.
Yeah.
Lots of tasks are performed already automatically by the system.
Yes.
So I appreciate that Microsoft asking MVPs and close people to Microsoft about feedback on these things. But the reality, I think, you shouldn't forget that the market is far wider. Right? And you have to ask them where they want to go.
It's an excellent point, and you know, we have the obvious dilemma, which I'll just highlight to be complete, which is the market often doesn't know what it doesn't know. So you know, the Henry Ford, if I asked my customers what would they want, they would have said faster horses, right? So at some point we have to think about how to sort of find the edge in the existing expert pool that can see the future and work with that edge to create sort of lighthouse activity that moves the market in that direction. And simultaneously, I think evangelism will help getting the other folks thinking about what you could do. I'm optimistic about what we can do to change the world of data, as you probably caught from my keynote. But I'm not sure how to crack that nut, as you very well summarized. Excel is a great existence proof of that, right? Your typical information worker probably uses 10% of its capabilities and doesn't even know all the other things that are in there.
Yeah, but customers at the end of the day, they don't want algorithms. They don't want systems.
Yeah, they
They
want
want solutions
actions.
to the things they struggle with today.
Yeah,
And they are very good at verbalizing this. So
yeah,
if I had a dream about improving my life,
yeah,
this is what I like to do.
yes,
This is what I like to be able to do. And that's the type of questions I think we should be able to answer.
yes, yeah. I agree with you.
Just looking down the road, I think that I like the request for developer tools, but I think democratizing it is going to open more doors.
Mhm.
And so I would love to see you guys take more of a TiVo approach where, you know, based on what you currently do, this is your suggested analytics. So you go out to the data catalog and you see all these data sources, but then there's also a feed there that is your suggested analytics. And of course, you're using all your fun suggested visualizations, which you've already done a lot of the heavy lifting to figure out which visualization does best. You know, you're doing that with Power BI.
Mhm.
And then, you know, make all that available with an RSS stream or something like that, and what's trending in the organization, what are other people interested in and using,
Mhm.
then you're helping people, you're taking away a lot of the heavy lifting, the friction, whatever you want to call it.
Right. So recommendation end framework
Well,
for,
and automation of, you know, back to the ecosystem thing, where you've got a lot of really cool data sources out there available from the marketplace, is that go ahead and run analytics on them. Go ahead and say, you know, these are some cool ways to look at this. This is some stuff that we've already found based on this available data.
Proactively.
Do you want to buy the data, or do you want to buy the data plus the analytics? You know, you can get your return on doing that.
that's a great point.
And then mash it up with your own environment, run the same analytics using similar data in your environment to.
Yeah, I got it. That's great. Did you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just as you mentioned, a lot of, like, for example, Excel users are probably only using a
Some small number.
percentage of what they actually can do. So when we're now shifting towards like more of self-service BI and stuff with like Power View, Power Pivot, and so forth. In my experience, when we see someone that's actually like they know this tool really well, everything looks really cool, you can do things really quickly.
Yes.
But whenever you set a person, if you're on a project, you show something really cool to the customer sees it, okay, I'm gonna try this. Then they come back and say, I didn't understand anything. Even though perhaps they have a better overview of what their data actually is than what I do, I can probably do a lot more with it than what they can do with it. So I'm concerned when it comes to, for this machine learning, how you can easily sell this part to the customer without scaring them from using it. So when they sit down the first time, how can they get a really positive feeling inside, like, okay, I understand at least some basics about how this will work, and I don't have to take a new master degrees in Excel,
Right.
or have like need a lot of training to be actually keep using it.
Yes.
And keep getting information which is valuable.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is, and I'm not sure if this will succeed, but this is the experiment we're investigating right now, is create a user experience that overloads the familiar tool they have. So, you know, what Judy showed in Power BI by example is very complicated query processing work that didn't look like that, right? And because we could overload how Excel worked. The question we have is, can we do that with machine learning in the Power BI stack? And what we're trying to do now is have a suggested model that says, you know, you're working on stock data that's doing prediction, here's some regression models that will work better on this. And if you click on it, it'll transform where the cursor is for the data sets that you have right now and just give you a peek at that. And we think most Excel users will understand how to apply that from their point of view. It literally is a black box, and they don't need to know what's inside that. So that's the consumption side of it. On the creation side of it, we have a dev tool story because we think that's natural. And you can take the Visual Studio developer who's invested in all of the technologies that we've had so far, and with a very small additional orientation, now has all of machine learning open to them, despite whatever their PhD status might be. So we think that's a natural one too. It's that in-between area that we're not sure about. Can we have an Excel user work in some sort of a frame that lets them construct these models from parts? And maybe. I don't know the statistics on how many people use macro programming in Excel or that kind of thing, but it's not the majority, right? And I think this could fall into that category. And so we're trying to find a way around that. Yeah.
But just to catch up this, I think the difference here is that it's not a solution, right? It's a platform. So Microsoft is providing us a platform, so it's for partners or vendors that can build solutions on top of it. And I think that is the difference, that customers, there are some customers that invest in people that can build solutions because they think they want to keep the IPR, and these could be customers, but at the end these are still people that are doing development, right? And these are people who are using this.
Mhm.
And if you have other customers, they just want to have, okay, this is my data, like, okay, this is my weblog data, get me out an analytic report of it, right? I don't care how, so this is just my data, then there is a kind of mechanism, and at the end I have a nice chart, how much people came from where, and and this is what people would buy.
Yes.
This would be an end-to-end solution.
Right.
And I think this is a difference. And the question is, like, now we are talking about, again, about use cases and what can we do with this, and customers at the end, it's too complicated for them. They just have an idea about, oh, this could be, but just really do it for me, right? But currently, it's also a price thing, because then you have to invest something, and they don't know really. So, oh, is this something? I don't know. I'm not sure how much, and so that's why people are a little bit, or customers are also a little bit. So everybody talks about, nobody does. And if you have a full solution offering, but then you are very focused on certain markets, and I think then you get another kind of feedback for people that want to buy a whole solution.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. And commoditization, economics are also a factor along, the programming surface that you leverage to create your platform has to be able to generate enough value to make the economics work, even if commoditization is occurring. And there are many examples where that's true and it will work. So, I've talked a lot about VB, but project planning. So project planning, when it first was a software augmented exercise, the tools were $20,000 tools, and companies would buy one seat, and there'd be one expert who would understand how to do dependency planning and all that stuff. And now it's $35, a seat. So we can imagine, and still there are the expert project planners that are constructing very advanced projects. NASA does not use a $35 project planning tool. Maybe they should, but that's a different story. But there will always be the room for the advanced person. So we think we can create a commoditization scheme without eroding the existing professional data science space, because we're expanding the market. And I think that's the key.
The fact that it's still too complicated, because nothing keeps you for now that you're doing all this since years, right? So the
Right.
tools are out there, the frameworks are out there, so everybody could do this for years.
Yes,
The question is now
they just haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the question is now, it's a kind of marketing and hype cycle, something comes back.
Yes.
Right, but for me, if you compare Passau to the existing tools, it's now a visual interface before you have a programming interface. But that's the difference, right? At the end, it's still very complex. You have to decide which techniques you choose. So
Yes.
From a user perspective, for me, it's still very complex, this area, and customers are very afraid how much should they invest in, and so they are, especially in Europe, people are not allowed to make mistakes, right? You have to do a decision and then it has to run, and that's why I think that other vendors in the market that say, oh yeah, just do it and you click and you click twice and then everything is beautiful, right? They got a lot of attraction, but at the end, the whole solution, it's still very
Because they're insulating the risk,
Yeah.
the perceived risk.
Yeah.
Perceived risk. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're almost right at our time. Anything else? This was a very lively discussion. Thank you for your engagement. I encourage you to reach out. Please email me. It's just my first name dot last name at Microsoft.com, or my team, or Mark, or anybody, and we'd be happy to continue the conversation, get you involved in the tool. We welcome your feedback as this thing evolves. It will only succeed with your help.
So the roadmap for this product is sometime next year, but is that also for the preview or something to play around with?
No, the preview. You can get involved in the preview soon, right away. Yep. Okay, thank you very much.